Here's a question from the audience. Please provide some insight on the Jonathan Pollard case. Now, everybody might not remember, so why don't you just give a little bit of background and tell us what your thoughts about that.
Okay, Jonathan Pollard was caught spying for Israel 27 or so years ago, and he made a plea bargain. He foolishly hired a Lebanese lawyer, thinking that that would give them an advantage, and the lawyer was not particularly an able lawyer and didn't do a particularly good job. He made a plea bargain, and the plea bargain was in exchange for Pollard not defending himself, not invoking gray mail, and cooperating fully on making sure American intelligence sources were completely protected. In exchange for that, the promise was he would not get life imprisonment. He would get a sentence of years, and the expectation was a sentence of years, much like others who had spied for American allies. 8 years for a guy who spied for Egypt, 7 years for a guy who spied for Poland that wasn't even an ally at the time. And what happened is he got life imprisonment. The plea bargain was broken because the United States attorney, Joe DeGeneva, cheated. What he did is he introduced an affidavit from Caspar Weinberger, who had been born to a Jewish family and hated his name and his face and was a really self-hating Jew, Caspar Weinberger, and he wrote an affidavit perjuriously describing Pollard as the worst spy in history and blaming him for the deaths of some people we now know Aldrich James was responsible for. In any event, the judge gave him life imprisonment, even though he had bargained for less than life imprisonment, and I became involved at that point in time. And the case was argued on Rosh Hashanah, and it was argued in front of a panel of 3 judges, 2 of whom were Jewish, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg was one of them. They refused to postpone the argument from Rosh Hashanah. And the 3rd judge was not Jewish. He wrote a scathing dissent, saying this was one of the greatest violations of due process possible. But the 2 Jewish judges affirmed the conviction. And I've always thought that their ethnicity had something to do with their affirming of a very, very unfair conviction. Since that time, I have been trying very hard to get some kind of a commutation. I spoke to President Clinton about it. I spoke to President Bush about it. I spoke to President Obama about it. President Clinton came very close. He wanted to do it. And George Tenet said, if you commute that sentence, I'm going to publicly resign. And he should have fired him because the statute prevents the CIA director from being involved in making policy. And when the CIA director threatens to quit over an issue like that, he's making policy, and the president backed away. And to this day, Jonathan Pollard is still in jail, 27 or 28 years later, for a crime that did deserve a prison term, but probably deserved a 7 or 8 or 9 year prison term. So I'm going to continue to fight for Jonathan Pollard, but I'm not optimistic that a president will have the courage to do the right thing.